Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Got a chance to watch the spring game back for Florida State this morning, and kind of coming out of the spring game, I think we all have a better feel for, what positions Florida State might want to add over the next couple of weeks in the transfer portal. Want to have two different conversations. One, talk about the positions that we've identified that probably could be improved in the transfer portal. And then more importantly, talk about some players, some targets that I think could be really good fits for this Florida State program. Fired up to get into this one. I went back and watched that spring game, and I came away with really 3 or 4 positions that I think Florida State could look at. One, the wide receiver spot, at least one more difference maker in this Florida State wide receiver room. And that conversation is kind of nuanced because I like a lot of the young talent. I like the talent of this Florida State wide receiver room. I kind of said that during our spring game recap. I think they could use at least one more guy with proven production at the Power 5 level. I look at the interior of the defensive line and say, I think Florida State's always going to look to improve that aspect. You talk about, winning an ACC title, winning national championships. You want to have elite line of scrimmage play, and you want to be deep there. I want to talk about a few guys that Florida State could go after there. And then I'll still say this. I think Florida State could use one more linebacker. And I know that's been kind of a contested topic with a lot of Florida State fans. I want to see the linebacker room. I want to see the floor get elevated. And what I mean by that is add a proven contributor at the Power 5 level that's played a lot of football. You got some young talent, very similar to the wide receiver room, but I don't know if you have two guys that you really think are going to be nails for you in that linebacker room. I think we know DJ Lundy is going to be very solid, but I don't know if we saw enough in that spring game to say, yeah, we feel good about 2, 3, 4 linebackers heading into 2024. So I want to talk about the linebacker position as well. And more importantly for you guys, would love to hear some of the positions that you would like to see Florida address in the comment section as well. I learned a ton from you guys. And I looked at that tight end spot, and I know a lot of Florida State fans believe they should address the tight end position. And quite frankly, I probably agree with that. That being said, you look through the transfer portal and say, I don't know if there's many tight ends that Florida State that elevate Florida State's tight end room. And so I didn't have a player to offer up for that one. All right, now I want to get into the targets. Before we do, and as always, though, just want to say thank you to you guys. A massive shout out to the Florida State fans. Y'all continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the fellas. I think it's going to be a busy next couple of weeks. We'll be breaking down the commitments. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And again, more importantly, would love to hear some of your feedback in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with that wide receiver position. And I want to talk about Keandre Lambert-Smith, who Florida State's kicking the tires on. Obviously, it hurt them that they couldn't communicate with him during that first week. He visited Texas A&M this weekend. He's looking to go out to USC. You look at Keandre Lambert-Smith, and why I think he's a perfect fit for Florida State is he's an all-encompassing wide receiver that has been really productive at the Power 5 level. And I think Keandre Lambert-Smith, as a Michigan fan myself, very familiar with Penn State, Keandre Lambert-Smith is probably a wide receiver that is going to the NFL draft this year. Had he not played in a Penn State offense that was absolutely brutal from a passing attack offense, Keandre Lambert-Smith, I think, is a phenomenal wide receiver that is kind of a bona fide 1,000-yard pass or 1,000-yard catcher on a lot of different offenses. I think he's a really well-rounded wide receiver that can separate, can be that possession receiver. Quite frankly, an argument that maybe Florida State is missing that kind of wide receiver in the room where you have guys that are big bodies that can work vertically. You have the speedsters in the wide receiver room. You look at that Florida State wide receiver room and say, who's that all-encompassing, that separator, that guy's going to get open, the route runner? I don't know if Florida State clearly has that in their wide receiver room. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith really could be one of those guys for that Florida State wide receiver room. The next wide receiver I want to talk about, and I have 3 wide receivers that I want to get into. Elijah Badger coming over from Arizona State, another guy similar to Keandre Lambert-Smith that probably is going to the NFL draft had he played in a somewhat decent offense, and Arizona State was largely just a dumpster fire last year. What I love about a guy in Elijah Badger is he's elite after the catch. Right? Caught for over 700 yards last year. 550 of those yards came after the catch. And you look at Mike Norvell, you look at what he is so good at in terms of scheming up an offense. He's very good at getting the football to his playmakers in space. You add Elijah Badger into that Florida State wide receiver room and say, you suddenly have just an absolute dynamic weapon that can operate after the catch. And this was a guy that at Arizona State, had 100 targets. The next highest wide receiver in terms of target share had 49. He was getting double the amount of targets that the next person at Arizona State was. That offense largely ran through Elijah Badger. Last guy I want to talk about, at the wide receiver position, Sam Brown from Houston, another really good wide receiver, and kind of checks those boxes that we were looking for in terms of proven production at the Power 5 level. 6'2", 195, ran a 4.45 coming out of high school. Really productive. I think can slot in as that boundary wide receiver that wants to work vertically down the field. And that's something we talked about, right? With DJU coming in to this Florida State offense, big arm, wants to push the ball down the field. Sam Brown, a guy that I think could really bring that kind of wide receiver to this Florida State offense. He's probably the third wide receiver I would look to add. I'd probably go Keandre Lambert-Smith, Elijah Badger, then Sam Brown. But this is a wide receiver that's going to be really hard to say no to if you want to go out and get him. Now, the next position that I want to talk about really quick is the inside of the defensive line. And I don't think this is like a desperation priority, because I thought you saw some good things from guys like KJ Sampson on Saturday, I should say. That being said, I'm always going to encourage Florida State to continue to build the trenches. And a guy that kind of pops up that I am very intrigued by is Jared Harrison-Hunt coming from Miami. Now, if y'all have listened to me talk Miami football, Jared Harrison-Hunt was a guy that I've been banging the table for the last couple of weeks and months. And this was a guy that you take a look back at his numbers in 2023, a pass rush win rate of 10%, 22 quarterback hurries, 16 run stops. Jared Harrison-Hunt, with all that talk about how good Miami's defensive line was, Jared Harrison-Hunt was second in the team in total quarterback hurries, a little bit undersized on the inside of that defensive line, but we kind of said that during the spring game. This is Mike Norvell's kind of defensive lineman, a guy that can penetrate, that can shoot gaps, that can create those negative plays. I'm a massive fan of Jared Harrison-Hunt, and quite frankly, you look at the defensive tackle market, if you will, it's really expensive. There are a lot of programs that are looking for those big-bodied interior guys. You probably get Jared Harrison-Hunt to come in and say, probably a little bit less of an attractive guy than some of the Dominic Williams types. I think this would be a really good ad that makes sense for Florida State. Last one I want to talk about, and we've talked about a bunch of veteran linebackers for Florida State, talked about Nikai Hillgreen, talked about Elijah Herring. Jaylen Alderman coming from Louisville, I think this one would make a lot of sense too. Started all 13 games for Louisville last year, over 600 snaps, 62 tackles, 7 tackles for a loss. I think this is exactly what we've talked about in terms of what Florida State needs to add in the transfer portal. A guy that has done it at the Power 5 level, that can come in, is not necessarily going to be a top 100 NFL draft pick, but just raises the floor, if you will, of what this Florida State linebacker room can be heading into 2024. Now, outside of that, I look at the offensive line and say, I think it's deep. I think it's good enough. I look at the running back room and say, we're very good there. Obviously set with quarterback, secondary, very good. This Florida State team doesn't have that many holes, but there are a few positions that I would like to see them add to. Would love to hear what you guys are thinking in the comments section. Appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.